in 864 AD, Japan's most, iconic, beautiful postcard image literally boiled an entire lake.
Yeah, an entire lake.
It burned a primeval forest to ash and sent the imperial court into just an absolute panic. And, I mean, today we buy keychains there.
Right, it's a huge tourist spot now.
Exactly. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are basically tearing up the tourist brochure of Mount Fuji. We're going to explore how a single geographic feature, a massive stratovolcano, really became the undisputed center of Japanese spiritual identity.
Which is such an amazing transition.
It really is. And to do that, we have to look past that serene, perfectly symmetrical, snow-capped peak that you probably have on your screensaver right now. We have to look at the mountain the way ancient people did, which is as a living, breathing, and terrifyingly active entity.
Yeah, it requires a complete reimagining of the landscape, honestly. Because, for most of human history, Mount Fuji wasn't something you just observe safely from the climate-controlled window of a bullet train. It was wild. It was deeply dangerous. And because of that danger, it was undeniably divine. It's sort of like the difference between looking at a majestic lion in a zoo safely behind glass versus suddenly encountering that same lion in the wild.
That's a great analogy. You're suddenly very aware that it could destroy you.
Exactly. And to reconstruct that wild reality today, we're relying on a really fascinating synthesis of materials. We've got archaeological survey reports from ancient shrines at the base, specifically the Moriyama and Yamamiya Asama shrines. Right. We're also looking at historical civic documents, town histories, the honestly grueling diaries of medieval mountain ascetics, and even classical literature, everything from 8th century poetry to indigenous folktales.
So we are basically stacking hard dirt archaeology, written political chronicles, and spiritual literature just to understand this one mountain that functioned as a deity.
That's exactly what we're doing.
But, before we can even grasp the theology of this mountain, we have to grapple with the sheer physical reality of it. Because you cannot separate the spiritual reverence from the topography, right?
Well, no, they are completely intertwined.
So just the basic facts for anyone who hasn't been there, Fuji is the highest peak in Japan. It stands at 3,776 meters.
Which is over 12,300 feet for those using that system.
Yes, massive.
Yeah.
But it isn't just the height that creates its commanding presence, is it? It's the isolation.
The isolation is key. You see, Mount Fuji is a stratovolcano. And in geological terms, that means it was formed by thousands of years of explosive eruptions and, viscous lava flows layering on top of one another.
It's a giant geological layer cake.
Exactly. And that's what builds that incredibly steep, symmetrical, almost impossibly perfect conical profile. But the thing is, because it stands relatively alone on the plains of Honshu, rather than, being swallowed up within a massive clustered mountain range of equal height, it completely commands the horizon.
Right. There's nothing competing with it.
Exactly. The geographical data in our sources confirms that on a clear day, Mount Fuji's visual reach is just staggering. To the east, it is visible from Inubusaki in Chiba Prefecture.
Wow.
To the west, you can see it all the way from Ago in Mie Prefecture.
Wait, Mie? That is incredibly far.
It is. You can even see it from the island of Mikurajima out in the ocean to the south, and from Nasu in Tochigi Prefecture to the north.
So that radius covers hundreds of kilometers.
Okay.
You're basically talking about a geographic anchor for the entire central region of the Japanese archipelago.
Yes, anchor is the perfect word for it.
Think about it. If you are living in ancient or medieval central Japan, no matter where you travel, whether you're a merchant walking the Tokaido Road or a farmer planting rice in a distant valley, or, a noble being carried in a palanquin, this massive structure is always dominating your visual field.
It's omnipresent. It dictates the weather patterns, it controls the regional water supply with its massive snowmelt, and essentially it is always watching you.
Which makes sense why map makers were so obsessed with it.
Oh, absolutely. When the famous Edo period cartographer Ino Tadataka began the monumental, decades-long task of mapping the entire Japanese archipelago using traditional surveying instruments, Mount Fuji served as his ultimate landmark.
Right.
In his incredibly detailed maps, the Ino-zu Fuji functions as the central anchor point. It was the undeniable reference coordinate for the entire region. It was like the one fixed truth in the landscape.
So it's massive, it's beautiful, it's the center of the map. But, if it's so beautiful and useful, why did ancient people fear it so much? That brings us back to the Jogan eruption in 864 AD.
Yes, the violent history.
The sources describe this eruption literally boiling a massive lake and killing all the fish. But what really fascinates me is how the provincial governors reported this to the capital.
That's the best part.
Right, because they didn't ask for disaster relief. They asked for theologians. What was the political calculation there? Because these early records aren't describing a natural disaster in the way we understand it today at all.
No, they aren't. The political calculation was rooted entirely in the cosmological worldview of the Heian period. You have to remember, in 864 AD, the imperial court in Kyoto did not possess modern geological science.
Right, they aren't looking at tectonic plates.
Exactly. They didn't know about magma chambers beneath the Philippine sea plate. So when a massive earthquake shatters the region and the mountain just cracks open, unleashing millions of cubic meters of basaltic lava, you interpret that as the wrath of a conscious entity.
You think we made the god angry.
Precisely. And the historical chronicles describe the lava flowing directly into Tsunami, which was a massive ancient lake at the northern base of the mountain. The heat and the sheer volume of the magma were so intense that the text literally describes the lake water boiling like water in a cauldron.
I just can't get over that image. Every living fish in the lake died, and the lava flows were so immense that they completely filled in large portions of the lake, fundamentally altering the geography forever.
Yeah, the landscape was permanently changed.
And the craziest part is, that massive plain of hardened, jagged lava from the Jogan eruption, that is the exact foundation of the Okigahara forest today. The roots of those trees are literally wrapped around the cooled rage of that specific eruption.
Which is such a powerful visual. And, an event like that forces a complete shift in local politics. This wasn't just geology, it was a diplomatic crisis with a god.
Right. It's a foreign policy issue.
Yeah.
But the foreign power is a volcano.
Exactly. When a deity of that magnitude throws fire and blocks out the sun with ash, your survival entirely depends on pacification. The provincial governors weren't asking Kyoto for grain to feed displaced farmers. They were asking for elevated court ranks and titles to bestow upon the mountain to calm it down.
We're sorry, please accept this promotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this pragmatic terror birthed the institutional worship of Fuji. The imperial court and local communities established the Asama shrines at the base of the mountain. And the primary function of these early shrines was not to, ask for good fortune on your exams or whatever.
Right, it wasn't a wishing well.
No. It was a desperate plea for the mountain to just remain dormant.
Please stop boiling our lakes and burning our forests. But here is where the mythology gets a little, complicated to me. To appease this violent lake-boiling fire god, the deity eventually becomes strongly associated with the goddess Konohana Sakuya Hime.
Yes.
And on paper, that seems like a really bizarre branding choice, because she is a goddess often associated with delicate cherry blossoms. Why associate an apocalyptic fire god with a fragile flower?
It definitely seems contradictory at first, but that's only until you unpack the specific mythology of Konohana Sakuya Hime in the ancient texts, like the Kojiki.
Yeah.
She isn't just a delicate symbol of spring.
Right.
She represents both exquisite beauty and unyielding, terrifying strength. In her foundational myth, she becomes pregnant after a single night with the celestial grandson, Ninigi.
Right.
And when he doubts the paternity of the children, suggesting they must belong to an earthly kami, she is, understandably, furious.
Unnatural.
So to prove her divine faithfulness, she builds a birthing hut, shuts herself inside, and literally sets it on fire. Wow.
Yeah. She declares that if the children are not of divine lineage, they will perish in the flames, but if they are true gods, they will survive. And she gives birth safely in the middle of a raging inferno.
Oh, wow. Okay, so she is a goddess who is completely at home inside a roaring fire.
Exactly.
That makes perfect sense then. You have this perfect, snow-capped mountain that occasionally bursts into apocalyptic flames. Konohana Sakuya Hime is the exact theological embodiment of a stratovolcano. Breathtakingly beautiful, but born of and immune to fire.
You nailed it. And this is really the turning point where Mount Fuji transitions from a geographical hazard to a spiritual magnet.
A spiritual magnet.
Yeah, because once it was formally recognized as a central active deity with an official shrine system, it began to accumulate different layers of Japanese religious thought. Think of it as a spiritual stratovolcano.
Oh, I like that.
Just as the physical mountain was built by successive layers of lava and ash, the spiritual identity of Fuji was built by centuries of layered belief systems. Okay, so let's break down those layers, starting with the oldest ancient nature worship, as seen in classical literature.
Right.
The Mensho, which was compiled in the 8th century, is the oldest existing collection of Japanese poetry. And the poems in there, They don't treat Fuji as a cute tourist backdrop. They treat it as a terrifying liminal space.
Absolutely.
There is a specific poem in the sources that describes Fuji as a place of unquenchable fire and eternal snow.
Which is such a striking image, and consider the paradox of that image from the perspective of an 8th century observer.
Right, because that doesn't make sense.
Exactly. Fire and snow coexisting in the exact same physical space completely defies the normal observable rules of nature. For the poets of the Menyoshu, this paradox was absolute proof that Fuji did not belong to the mundane human world.
It was a glitch in the matrix.
Yeah. It was a borderland. It was a place where the veil between the earth and the heavens was thin, and where the normal physics of reality were just suspended.
And that idea of suspended reality creates a perfect bridge to the folk religion layer, right?
Yeah.
Which is immortalized in one of Japan's most famous stories, The Tale of the Bamboo Cutter, or Taketori Monogatari.
Yes, from the 9th or 10th century.
Right. Most people probably know it as the story of Princess Kaguya, the celestial being discovered inside a glowing bamboo shoot.
Yeah.
But the ending of the story is actually an etiology, an origin myth for Mount Fuji itself.
It is, and it's a beautiful ending. When Princess Kaguya is forced to return to the moon, she leaves behind an elixir of immortality for the emperor, who had fallen deeply in love with her.
Right.
But the emperor is so consumed by grief that he refuses to live forever without her, so he commands his soldiers to take the elixir to the highest peak in the land, the physical point closest to the heavens and to Kaguya, and burn it.
He burns the elixir of eternal life on Mount Fuji. And the sources point out an incredible linguistic detail here. The smoke from that burning elixir is the mythical explanation for the volcanic smoke that constantly rose from the peak in antiquity.
Right.
And the very name Fuji is often tied to this specific folk concept through phonetic wordplay, because the characters for not, which is fu, and death, which is chi or ji, combined to create fushi or Fuji.
Yes.
The mountain of non-death, the mountain of immortality. I mean, it's just brilliant storytelling.
It really is. The folk tradition literally embedded the concept of eternal life into the very name and the physical smoke of the volcano.
Right.
And then as we move forward in time, we see the formal development of Shinto beliefs layered onto this. Within Shinto, the focus is entirely on purity and the presence of kami, the divine spirits.
Okay, so how does that apply to the mountain?
Well, as you ascend Mount Fuji, the environment becomes increasingly harsh. The trees disappear, the air thins, and the landscape turns into this desolate expanse of volcanic rock. In Shinto theology, this physical inhospitability confirms that the peak is a sacred, pristine zone reserved purely for the gods.
So it's not a place for humans.
Right. It is a realm intentionally hostile to human habitation to maintain its ritual purity.
But then Buddhism arrives from the mainland. And, you know, when you look at European history, when a new, highly structured religion encounters an established indigenous belief system, the result is usually centuries of brutal conflict.
Very true.
The old gods are demonized. But that doesn't happen with Buddhism and Mount Fuji. The Buddhist monks in Kyoto didn't look at this massive fire god and declare it a demon. They integrated it.
They did.
How exactly does a foreign religion look at an indigenous volcano god and say, yes, this is ours too? What is the mechanism there?
The mechanism is a really uniquely Japanese theological framework known as Honji Sujaku.
Haji Sujaku.
Right. It translates roughly to original ground and local traces.
Which sounds very academic.
It does, but the concept is actually quite practical. Buddhist intellectuals proposed that the universal cosmic Buddhas and bodhisattvas were the absolute truth. That's the original ground.
Okay.
However, out of deep compassion for the local people of Japan, these universal entities manifested themselves as the local Shinto kami, which are the local traces.
Ah, I see. So they aren't competing gods. They're just different localized avatars of the same cosmic software, essentially.
Exactly. The local kami are simply the approachable, culturally specific masks worn by the universal Buddhas. Under this framework, Buddhist thinkers looked at Fuji and declared it an earthly manifestation of the Pure Land, a celestial paradise presided over by Amida Buddha.
Wow.
They also conceptualized the mountain as a giant physical mandala.
Now, a mandala being a geometric map of the Buddhist cosmos, usually painted on silk, right?
Yes.
But they are mapping it onto a three-dimensional mountain. How does that work in practice? Do specific rocks represent specific deities?
Yes, exactly that. The peaks surrounding the crater, the specific ravines, and the trails themselves were mapped to correspond with the deities and realms depicted in esoteric Buddhist mandalas.
That's incredible.
So the physical act of moving across the mountain actually became a ritual act of traversing the Buddhist universe. Furthermore, the fiery indigenous goddess of the mountain, Konohana Sakuyahime, was identified as the local manifestation of Danichi Nyorai, the supreme cosmic Buddha of light and truth.
So the fire of the volcano became the illuminating light of Buddhist wisdom.
Precisely.
And the sources point out a fascinating, highly pragmatic outcome of this Buddhist integration. Because the mountain was viewed as a sacred mandala and a pure land, Buddhist precepts were enforced on its slopes. The most critical precept being the prohibition against taking life.
Right. The nonviolence aspect.
This prohibition extended beyond just hunting animals. It included an injunction against needlessly harming plants, cutting down trees, or destroying the natural environment.
Exactly. As a direct result of Fuji's integration into Buddhist theology, these rules were strictly applied to the upper elevations of the mountain.
So they basically accidentally created a massive nature preserve centuries before the concept of environmentalism or national parks even existed.
Yeah, the theology itself mandated ecological preservation. It's really remarkable.
So we have ancient awe, folktales of immortality, Shinto purity, and Buddhist cosmology all stacked together. But up to this point, normal people aren't climbing this mountain.
No, absolutely not.
It is too sacred, and it is far too dangerous. The appeasement happens at the bottom. The shift from worshiping the mountain from afar to physically climbing it comes from our next layer, Shugendo.
Yes, Shugendo. It is perhaps the most intense and complex religious movement in Japanese history.
Intense is a good word for it.
Definitely. It is a syncretic tradition that blends esoteric Buddhism, indigenous Shinto, and specific elements of Taoist physical alchemy and magic. Its practitioners are called yamabushi, which translates to those who lie in the mountains.
Now, when we talk about Taoist magic in this context, we aren't talking about, like, pulling rabbits out of hats. We are talking about manipulating the natural energies of the world, right?
Right. We are talking about physical alchemy. Shugendo incorporates the belief that spiritual power, or Janriki, cannot be acquired merely by sitting in a quiet temple chanting sutras.
You can't just study for it.
Exactly. Spiritual power must be forged. It is gained by subjecting the human body to extreme, agonizing physical practices in the harshest, most unforgiving natural environments.
Like freezing waterfalls.
Yeah, freezing waterfalls, fasting in caves, and ascending treacherous peaks. The Yamabushi believed that by surviving these trials, they could absorb the raw, untamed energy of the mountain itself, granting them supernatural abilities over illness, spirits, and the elements. Mountains were not scenery, they were brutal proving grounds.
And they looked at Mount Fuji, the tallest, harshest, most dangerous volcano on the archipelago, and determined it was the ultimate proving ground.
It was the final boss, basically.
Right. And the sources highlight a specific Yamabushi named Matsudai Shonin in the 12th century. He didn't just pray to Fuji, he decided to conquer it physically.
Matsudai Shonin is a truly pivotal figure. Around the mid-1100s, legend claims he climbed Mount Fuji hundreds of times. But his crowning achievement was organizing the logistics to build a functioning Buddhist temple named Dainichiji right on the summit.
We really need to pause and think about the logistics of that.
It's mind-boggling.
This is the 12th century. There is no Gore-Tex. There are no oxygen tanks, no lightweight carabiners, no helicopters. They are ascending a 3,776-meter active volcano in straw sandals and hemp robes, hauling up timber, bronze statues, and supplies to build a structure capable of surviving summit blizzards.
It is a staggering feat of human endurance and devotion. You just can't overstate it. Matsudai Shonin's temple at the summit represents a monumental paradigm shift.
Because it changes how people interact with the mountain.
Exactly. Fuji was no longer merely a distant object of fear to be appeased from the foothills. It became a physical destination for spiritual transformation. And to manage this transformation, the ascetics of Shugendo created a geographical mapping system that still dictates how every single tourist interacts with the mountain today.
The system of the 10 stations, or GOM. If you go to Mount Fuji today, the trails are still divided into 10 stations, starting with the first at the base and ending with the 10th at the summit.
Right.
But when I read the sources on how they determined these stations, it completely changed my understanding of the mountain.
Oh, wow.
Because these stations are not based on elevation. They're not based on walking distance.
No, they are entirely spiritual markers. The 10 stations are mapped directly onto the Buddhist concept of the 10 realms of existence.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, in Buddhist cosmology, all sentient beings cycle through different realms based on their karma. You have the lower realms, hell, hungry ghosts, animals, and asuras, which are warring spirits. Then you reach the human realm.
Right.
Above that are the heavenly realms, leading ultimately to the realms of bodhisattvas and Buddhas. The Yamabushi took this abstract metaphysical map of the soul's journey toward enlightenment and essentially draped it over the physical topography of Mount Fuji.
So as you climb, you are not just gaining altitude. You are physically walking your body through the realms of reincarnation.
Exactly.
And the detail that absolutely floored me is where they placed the boundary. The transition from the 5th station to the 6th station.
It's brilliant. The 5th station represents the human realm, and the 6th station represents the heavenly realm.
And if you look at the actual physical environment of the mountain at that exact point, it matches perfectly. The 5th station is roughly where the tree line ends.
Yes.
It is the point where the forests die away, the air becomes noticeably thin, and the landscape abruptly shifts to barren, unforgiving volcanic rock. They took the physical, biological boundary of human habitability and declared it the border between the world of mortals and the world of the divine.
It is a brilliant synthesis of geography and theology. When a pilgrim crosses from the 5th to the 6th station, they are symbolically dying to the human world. They are entering the harsh, pure realm of gods. And the grueling climb from the 6th to the 10th station is a physical enactment of the soul's arduous journey toward ultimate enlightenment. When you finally reach the crater at the 10th station, you have reached the realm of Buddhahood.
But you can't stay there.
No. Critically, in Shugendo, you must descend. You must bring the spiritual power and enlightenment you forged at the summit back down into the human world to help the community.
It transforms a hike into a cosmic drama enacted by your own feet.
Perfectly said.
So we have all these layers. Ancient awe, folktales, Shinto purity, Buddhist mandalas, and Shugendo physical alchemy. This brings us to a crucial question of global religious history. Why didn't they fight?
Right. The lack of conflict is so unique.
Because in Western traditions, a sacred mountain operates very differently. Think of Mount Sinai in the Abrahamic traditions. It is highly sacred, but it is essentially a stage. It is the location where Moses receives the law from Yahweh. The mountain is important because of the event that occurred there, but the granite rock of Sinai is not Yahweh, or Mount Olympus in Greek mythology. It is the magnificent residence of the gods, but the mountain itself is not Zeus. The mountain is just the real estate.
That is the fundamental divergence right there.
Yeah.
In the Japanese tradition, Mount Fuji is not merely the residence of a deity, nor is it the stage for a divine encounter. The physical volcano is the deity.
The rock is the god.
Yes. The rock, the snow, the ash, the fire, they constitute the divine entity itself. Because the sheer physical presence of the mountain was the undeniable truth, it forced a theology of inclusion rather than exclusion.
Right.
Shinto localized it as a pristine kami. Buddhism universalized it as a cosmic pure land. Shugendo made it a physical proving ground. And they all layered together seamlessly. You didn't have to choose between worshiping the Shinto kami or the Buddhist manifestation. They were recognized as different lenses through which to understand the exact same immense, undeniable power.
Now, when we talk about ancient mountain ascetics and cosmic mandalas, it is very, very easy for international audiences to fall into an Orientalist trap.
Yes, the mystical stereotype.
Exactly. We start imagining medieval Japan as this misty, purely mystical land where everyone is floating around in a spiritual trance, completely disconnected from reality.
Yeah.
But the historical sources, specifically the civic documents and archaeological reports, paint a picture of a highly organized, deeply pragmatic, and fiercely economic system.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't a disorganized free-for-all of wandering mystics.
Not at all.
By the medieval period and expanding massively into the Edo period, the management of Mount Fuji was a highly structured industry. The sources give us extensive data on complexes like the Moriyama Sengen Shrine at the base.
Right.
As the concept of pilgrimage grew, it required massive logistical infrastructure to support thousands of people trying to climb a volcano. This gave rise to specific guilds of guides known as oshi.
The oshi are fascinating.
Yeah.
They basically functioned as travel agents, spiritual directors, and innkeepers, all rolled into one highly lucrative profession.
Yes, they were the gatekeepers.
You couldn't just show up in your straw sandals and start walking up the mountain on your own.
No, it was strictly regulated. Pilgrims had to go through the oshi. Because the mountain was a sacred zone, you couldn't just enter it. You had to be ritually pure.
Right.
So the oshi provided the necessary purification rituals at the base, which often involved fasting, cold water ablutions, and specific chanting over several days. They provided the lodging for the pilgrims at their base camp estates. They provided the specialized gear, and they physically guided the groups up the specific approved routes.
And they completely controlled the economics of the entire operation.
They really did.
The historical documents detail an extensive system of tolls and fees specifically levied on the pilgrims. You paid for the lodging, you paid for the purification rituals, you paid the guide fees, and you paid tolls at specific stations on the ascent.
It was a massive spiritual economy. I mean, the sheer volume of currency flowing through these pilgrim networks funded the massive shrine complexes, paid for the maintenance of the trails, and served as the economic backbone for the entire local region.
It was big business.
Huge. The Oshi would even travel across Japan during the off-season, visiting villages to preach the virtues of climbing Fuji and essentially, sell pilgrimage packages for the following summer.
So they were managing a spiritual franchise. It was logistics, it was marketing, and it was crowd control on a lethal volcano.
Ugh.
It is a true testament to their organizational genius that they could facilitate mass, profitable pilgrimage while rigorously maintaining the spiritual integrity and physical safety of the climbers.
It forces us to respect the complexity of the era. The worship of Mount Fuji was a perfect marriage of profound theological depth and ruthless economic pragmatism.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today. We have traced the 3,776 meters of physical basalt, witnessed the apocalyptic boiling lakes of the Jogan eruption, decoded the 8th century poetry of the Manyoshu, mapped the Buddhist 10 realms onto the physical tree line, and audited the economic ledgers of the medieval Oshi guides.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But this deep, complex layering is simply too massive to contain in a single discussion.
We have barely scratched the surface of the archaeological reports and historical diaries we have assembled.
Which is exactly why this deep dive is just the foundation. This deep dive officially kicks off a special 8-part series on Mount Fuji.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to it.
In the coming sessions, we are going to get incredibly granular. We're going to trace the exact ancient climbing routes, like the Murayama route, analyzing every ruined shrine along the path.
We'll also unpack the daily lives and the specific grueling training regimens of the hardcore Yamabushi ascetics.
And we have translated the actual personal diaries of everyday farmers and merchants from the Edo period who made the climb. We will read their exact words about what they ate, how much they paid, and what terrified them on the slopes.
We will also delve into the military and political history, exploring how powerful samurai warlords, particularly the legendary Takeda clan, interacted with the mountain's power.
Right, because they didn't just worship it. They actively tried to harness its spiritual authority and military geography for their own violent campaigns.
So I invite you to join us on this historical ascent. By the end of this 8-part series, you will understand the mechanics of every hidden path, the theology of every ruined shrine, and the economic reality of every layer of belief that built this mountain.
It is going to be an unparalleled journey. But let's consolidate our core takeaways for today's introduction. Mount Fuji is not merely a piece of passive scenery or a glossy tourist postcard. It is 3,776 meters of geographical dominance.
Yes.
It is a terrifying, highly active stratovolcano that ancient people were forced to appease to ensure their own survival, transforming a geological hazard into a conscious, living deity.
And over centuries, it evolved into a unique spiritual melting pot, seamlessly synthesizing ancient awe, folktales of immortality, Shinto purity, Buddhist cosmology, and extreme physical asceticism into a singular, unified Japanese identity.
It stands as the ultimate physical embodiment of a culture's complex, enduring relationship with the terrifying and beautiful forces of the natural world.
Absolutely.
So the next time you see an image of Mount Fuji, whether it is on a travel brochure, a digital screensaver, or an ancient woodblock print, do not just see snow and rock. See 1,000 years of human awe.
See the smoke of the emperor's elixir of immortality rising from the crater.
See the political panic of the Heian court and the brutal endurance of the medieval ascetics. See a masterpiece of religious engineering.
Look past the scenery and recognize the deity.
I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over before we begin part 2 of our series. Today, modern infrastructure has fundamentally altered how humanity interacts with the mountain. We have paved toll roads. Massive tourist buses and rental cars can drive directly up the slopes, bypassing the ancient pilgrim trails entirely, and dropping thousands of people off at a sprawling parking lot filled with souvenir shops, vending machines, and noodle restaurants. And where is that massive modern parking lot located?
It is at the 5th station.
The exact boundary line mapped by the ancient ascetics. Based on the Shugendo map we just unpacked, the fifth station is the absolute final edge of the human realm. Millions of international tourists every single year get off their air-conditioned buses, buy a keychain, and take smiling selfies right on the precipice of the heavenly realm.
It's kind of surreal to think about.
It really is. As they stand there checking their phones and drinking their coffee,
Huh.
how many have realized they are standing on the very edge of a medieval spiritual universe? We will see you next time.